This is Spectacle Island, located off the shoreline where the Minutemen's castle once stood. Let me tell the story of what happened to this castle, and how Spectacle Island may become its successor. The Commonwealth has been enduring a war between the Institute Alliance, comprising of the Institute and their hired mercenaries, the Gunners, and the Commonwealth Alliance, comprising of the Minutemen and the Brotherhood of Steel. The Minutemen General recently made contact with the Institute. The Institute, seeming rather diplomatic, proposed an alliance with the Minutemen. They offered the people of the Commonwealth their technology, promising to advance the Commonwealth towards a safer, brighter future. The Minutemen were skeptical. Prior Institute affairs suggested that they had other, more sinister plans for the fate of the Commonwealth. They declined the Institute's offer, but agreed to continue negotiations in hopes that common ground could be met between the warring factions. No long-term deals were yet made. However, a ceasefire was enacted immediately after the initial negotiations. The castle, which was under Institute occupation, was also to be returned to Minutemen control. Further negotiations were planned between the factions, but for now, the fighting would stop. Peace was in sight. Shortly after leaving the Institute, the Minutemen General was leading a squad towards the castle to finish their reacquisition of their HQ. However, the Institute had other plans. They did not want peace, they wanted control, and if they could not control the Minutemen, they would destroy them. The Minutemen General was given a front row seat to the full atomic destruction of everything that the Minutemen had built. He was deceived. War has returned throughout the Commonwealth. The Minutemen have been suffering heavy losses, outmatched by their opponents. The Institute, utilising their teleportation technology, sabotaging defences of Minutemen settlements, whilst the Gunners act as a well-trained ground force for assault operations. Fortunately, the Brotherhood of Steel have developed technology to counteract Institute teleportation, and the Minutemen have a location in mind for their new HQ, Spectacle Island. Surrounded by the ocean, the Gunners' ground forces would have a hard time accessing the island, whilst the Brotherhood can deploy their anti-teleportation technology around the island, granting it almost full immunity against any Institute sabotage. There is still the paranoia that anyone could be a synth, that anyone could turn the tide of the Commonwealth War, that anyone could destroy the dream of rebuilding the Commonwealth. With the castle being destroyed, the Minutemen lose its strategic location and radio capabilities. They're now looking at building their new HQ at Spectacle Island, arguably a stronger location, with it having no access from the mainland, which then presents the question, how will the Minutemen handle the logistics of Spectacle Island without being able to run the traditional Brahmin provisioners? There's two ways that I can think of. The Brotherhood, the Minutemen's ally, can fly their vertibirds from the airport to Spectacle Island, and the other method is by boats. If we take a look around the island, there isn't any location where logistics can be safely unloaded by either of the methods. So, to begin the rebuild, we would need to build a port and a vertibird landing pad to facilitate supplying the island with building materials. For most of my builds, I approach them as if the Minutemen themselves are building the structures, but for the port, I instead want to build it as if it was already here before the bombs. There isn't really a whole lot on Spectacle Island that can give it much of a pre-war background. So I've decided to dig into the real-world history of Spectacle Island and came across some interesting images which I want to base the port off of. As we can see in this image, there's some buildings sitting on a platform elevated above the water. So I'm going to begin to build some of these structures, trying to resemble the ones in the picture as much as possible. Now with some buildings in place, we can start the supporting wall, holding the buildings up above the water. It's looking good, but I think I'm going to replace the larger orange brick building with a different structure. Okay, that looks much better. There's a barge with shipping containers originally on Spectacle Island, before I scrapped it. So I'm thinking that the shipping containers on that barge would have come from somewhere like this port. So let's help tell that story by building some of the containers on this platform. Now with those containers in place, the pre-war part of the port is complete. It's now time for the Minutemen to utilize the port for their logistical needs. The Minutemen can use the port itself for unloading the supplies, but unloading is only half of the job, as they will also need somewhere to store their supplies. And here we have the warehouse completely decorated, with plenty of stored supplies ready for the Minutemen to utilise them in rebuilding the rest of the island. I mentioned earlier that the Brotherhood of Steel will place their anti-teleportation devices around Spectacle Island, but first they will need a landing pad to deliver those devices. I'm not too sure on the location that I built the landing pad. I'll probably move it later on in the build, but as far as the design goes, I'm pretty happy with it. Now that the logistical problems of Spectacle Island have been solved, it's time for the Minutemen to rebuild their first structure on the island. Come to think of it, it's actually the only structure on the island. I've repaired the structure, making sure to keep the pre-war and post-war repairs visibly separate. I also gave the outside a fenced-off area where some supplies like food and water are temporarily stored. I made sure to repair the interior of the structure, so now I think it's time that we decorate the place. One thing that you'll notice is that there aren't any lights in the interior. I did that on purpose as I wanted it to feel like a thrown together base. That's why the dining area is also a part of the workshop. The bottom floor is mostly a workshop where tools and weapons can be repaired, and some storage where firearms and ammunition is stored. If we go upstairs, we get led into a room that's still being repaired. There's also some sleeping quarters for the Minutemen who work at this outpost. And finally this room. I made it a doctor's bedroom, which also serves as his operating room, just in case any injuries happen to any of the builders whilst rebuilding the island. With that done, the Minutemen now have their operations set up on Spectacle Island. Close to the forward operating base that we just built, I want to build a defensive watchtower that can help defend the island. I went for a vastly different design than my usual towers, giving it more of a ranger tower look, like something you would see in a Canadian forest. Right up the top, there's a place where a Minuteman ranger lives. They keep an eye out for any incoming enemies which may be trying to invade the island. You may notice that I scrapped the entire island of all of its trees and plants. If we left it like this, without any flora, then it would end up looking quite strange at the end of the build. So throughout the build, I'll be, I guess, regrowing the flora to help keep the build feeling natural. I probably won't show much more of the tree and bush building, but I'm sure that you'll notice plenty of it throughout the rest of the rebuild. I mentioned earlier that Spectacle Island will serve as the Minutemen's new HQ, but not in the same way that the castle was the Minutemen's headquarters. The Minutemen already have their new military headquarters, which we recently rebuilt at Fort Strong, so we don't need Spectacle Island to fulfill that role. Instead, Spectacle Island will serve as the logistical headquarters of the Commonwealth, being able to supply the Commonwealth by boat anywhere on the eastern shoreline. So it will also need to produce many of the needs for the people of the Commonwealth. It will be a great place for production as there's plenty of land for farms, water for purifying, and even fish to catch in the ocean. I want to begin the farming production not with crops like usual, but instead with a Brahmin farm. I'm pretty happy with how this barn turned out. There's razor grain, hay stored for the Brahmin, and 3 stalls where Brahmin are kept during the night. Outside the barn, they have a grazing field where they can come and roam around during the day. If we take a step back, I think that the build looks quite nice sitting on this hill also. Another animal that we can farm on the island is chickens. Chickens can act as a reliable source of consistent protein due to their eggs. which makes them invaluable for the tato dieting people of the Commonwealth. Speaking of tatoes, near the chicken coop, I made sure to plant a field with a few. With those animal pens built, we already have a decent farming operation on the island started. Now what we need is someone who can tend to these animals. I was looking around the island for a good spot to place their home, and I decided that I'm gonna build it close to the shoreline. I've got the house in place with the outside also decorated. I wanted to utilise its position, being nearby to the shore, so I gave it a pier where the owner can fish and even collect some of his own purified water, making that lifestyle pretty much fully self-sufficient. I often build my interiors with quite open floor plans, as it can be hard creating more realistic house layouts in Fallout. But with this house, I wanted to push myself and go for more of a realistic interior, with multiple smaller rooms and hallways. There's a couple of bedrooms on one side of the house, then through this hallway leads to the back room, which through the back door leads out onto the pier. They have a joint dining room and a kitchen, which came out really nice, I think. And finally a pantry where they can keep all of their food stored. As far as houses go, in my opinion, this is definitely one of the best results I've had in the series so far. So we now have some animals being farmed for food. I now want to begin the water purifying operation. Not just enough for the people of Spectacle Island, but an industrial operation which can supply many settlements throughout the Commonwealth. Here, I've built the water purifying operation with 2 large industrial purifiers, which then transfer into these 3 water tanks. Then, the water is pumped into this warehouse, where it is stored in these water tanks. Then, barrels can be filled with purified water and be stored upstairs or taken down to this dock, ready to be transported throughout the Commonwealth. I wanted to build a separate pier to the port, which we built earlier, as lugging barrels across the island seemed like a lot of work when it can all just be loaded straight into the boats right at the heart of the operation. With the water purifying operation set up, I now want to continue planting more fields, continuing to grow the food output of Spectacle Island. See what I did there? I planted a large cornfield behind the Brahmin stable and also a razor grain field. I wanted quite a lot of razor grain as it's the feed for the Brahmin, so it made sense that the Brahmin's food source is grown on the island. Everything that we've built on this part of the island is out of the site of the watchtower that we built earlier, so I'm going to build the exact same design as that watchtower, but on this side of the island. I've already shown this design, so I won't show it for too long, but it did take me an hour to build, so I need to make sure that hour was worth it and let it take up some screen time. So far, we've managed to build up a decent amount of water and food production on Spectacle Island. The production operation is not finished, but I want to take a break from that aspect of the island and start working on the residential areas. I've been umming and ahhing about where I should start it when I came to the conclusion that keeping the residential area on the shoreline of the island would be a good idea. There's lots of these little land mounds around the shoreline, so I want to connect them all up with walkways so that we can then begin building houses along it. I've connected up the land mounds, so now we can begin putting in some houses. I came up with an interesting idea to start off the residential area. Remember that barge full of shipping containers that I mentioned earlier? Well, I wanted to make it look like settlers have repurposed those shipping containers, turning them into their homes. Quite happy with how this turned out. Utilizing the mod G2M, I was able to stack multiple shipping containers around each other, giving a cramped but still cozy look to the area. I won't show you all of the interiors, but I will show you one of them. And this lucky guy even has an outdoor patio with a great view out onto the ocean. Now, those shipping containers are not nearly enough housing for the residential district of the island. I went for more of a classic scrappy shack for these two. With them being different to the containers, it helps to add more variety to the street. Well, this isn't really a street, it's a... Next, I want to build a restaurant which can also double as a pub, where settlers can come and socialise after their long days at work. I built the structure continuing on the street, and it has an outdoor patio where settlers can have a few drinks in the fresh air, and then inside there's some tables where patrons at the restaurant can eat their meals, and of course there's the bar where they can get some drinks. At the back of the bar, I built a pier as I thought that fishermen coming back from their day out at sea could dock up at this pier and then go inside and meet with their fellow fishermen for a few drinks. Many people will be visiting Spectacle Island, either because of family or the sailors running the logistics to and from the island. Some of these people will need somewhere to sleep, so I want to build a few hotel rooms that they could rent out for a night. Here we have the finished hotel rooms. I guess it's more of a motel, I don't know. The rooms aren't the nicest place in the Commonwealth, but it will give a sailor somewhere to keep their head out of the rain for a night. If you're wondering how someone would book a room for the night, well, I imagine that the rooms are run by the pub owner, so if he's not renting any rooms, at least he has a reliable income from the booze. Right at the end of the street, I want to build another house, but this house will be a little bit different to the others. You'll see what I mean. This guy seems to like his radiation, and he even uses it to help him grow some plants in his greenhouse. He's a bit paranoid about visitors, so he set up some automated home defense at his front door. The Minutemen are utilizing boats to gain access and run logistics to and from Spectacle Island, but they don't have a military navy to help defend their logistic boats in the event of a hostile attack. So I want to build a shipyard where the Minutemen navy can operate from. This was a fun build to put together. There's a building on the dock itself, which is where the Minutemen can fix up any small rowboats and keep some handy maintenance supplies nearby the main fleet. Then, out on the dock, there's a few ships docked up. There's a ship which transports soldiers from Fort Strong, the Minutemen's military headquarters, and an armoured cargo ship with turrets on both starboard and port sides. There's also plenty of flags waving proudly, including Spectacle Island's very own settlement flag. Now I want to build access to this dock. I built a walkway leading to the island, and I also thought that kind of a scrappy lighthouse would be necessary to help guide the boats into the dock. I decided against going with a classic round lighthouse, and instead with more of a scrappy look with a boat's cabin. Spectacle Island has a good amount of razor grain, but no real place for storing the grain. Most farms store their grains in silos, however creating a silo in Full Lat 4 is gonna be a bit tricky, but I'll see what I can come up with. I decided on building 2 of them, and I used the barn kit to match with some of the other farm structures. Not many silos are square, but I still think that they work quite well. You can still easily tell what they're meant to be. Continuing on with the food production of Spectacle Island, we have animals and crops, but there's still a food source that we haven't taken advantage of, and that is fish. Fishermen can take out some boats and do some fishing, but I also want a fish farm where settlers can reliably farm fish from the shorelines of Spectacle Island. I'm quite happy with how the poles sticking out of the water give kind of a busy look to the build. Connected to these poles, there's nets where the fish are farmed, and also on the fish farm, there's a shed which stores some spare equipment for the aquaculture operation. This is the first time I've ever used the word aquaculture. Blame Google, it said it was the right word for this. I also moved the vertibird landing pad between the logistics port and the fish farm, as I wasn't really happy with where I originally built it. Oh, I built the final watchtower, which now gives Spectacle Island a full 360-degree watchtower coverage. Placing turrets all around the island seems kind of silly, as the main deterrent to invaders will be spotting them before they can even arrive on the island. Another strategic component that was lost by losing the castle was the radio station. It gave the Minutemen the ability to be alerted when a settlement was in danger, so I think it's time to rebuild the Minutemen radio on Spectacle Island. Here we have the radio tower for the station, not as large as the castles, but it still gets the job done. Inside the structure itself, we have a communication room, and in the other room there's some more communication desks. Then if we head upstairs, this is where the Minutemen who work at the radio station live. They have a kitchen and a bedroom for each of them. Outside the radio station, I decided to expand the razor grain field. I felt as though the field that we had wasn't enough to portray a grain field, which are often quite large. There's this little outskirts section of Spectacle Island behind the radio building. To fill this area in, I'm thinking of building a few shacks where settlers can live. I didn't want this area to feel too cramped or busy, to help emphasize that it is the outskirts of the settlement. Filling in little areas like this may not seem too important, but they do add an immersive feel to the settlement when it all comes together. Considering that Spectacle Island can ship out supplies across the Commonwealth, another shipping method that I want to have on the island is a post office. Settlers would want to communicate with their families that live in other settlements, and with Spectacle Island having the ability to ship across the Commonwealth, it just makes sense that the Postal Service headquarters would be here on Spectacle Island. We now have the first building of the Commonwealth Postal Service complete. I really like how the structure came out, and inside there's the service desk, and there's plenty of stored parcels and letters all throughout the building. It may not look organised, but I'm sure the person who works here runs an organised mess kind of operation. I recently had the thought that the people of the Commonwealth don't have access to bread. Civilizations were built on the ability to turn mass-farmed grains into delicious fresh bread. Many people relied on bread for their daily nutrition, and considering the decline of society after the bombs, I imagine that bread would be invaluable for survival in the Commonwealth. So we will start the Commonwealth's very own bakery, ran and operated by the Minutemen themselves. I wanted this structure to be stronger and more stable than the other buildings, as the bakery is a very important asset for the Minutemen. Inside, there's 2 fireplaces on each side of the central wall, which then heat up these ovens on the other side, which is where the bread is then baked. You can make good bread with just flour and water, but to make great bread, you need yeast. Yeast is often extracted from fermented alcohol products, and considering that so many wastelanders rely on alcohol, having a production of it on the island would be a great way to boost the Minutemen's income and produce yeast for the nearby bakery. I decided on the warehouse kit for the structure, which is where the beer fermentation and bottling operation happens. I imagined that razor grain is the barley substitute, while silt beans can act as the hop substitute, so I made sure to plant a few silt beans at the end of the distillery. I doubt it would be a very nice brew, but considering the alternative of 200-year-old drinks, I think the people will be fine with it. In the past, people often drank alcohol products as a safer alternative to the water that they had available. I think that settlers of the Commonwealth, considering all of the irradiated water, would often do the same thing. Now that Spectacle Island has alcohol production and a bar for people to drink, there's one downside that comes with these two things. It attracts a bad sort of people. So the Minutemen need to create some law and order on the island to keep the riffraff in order. I used the same materials as I did with the bakery for the police station. And inside, I wanted to give it a Western Sheriff Station look, with the jails and sheriff's sleeping quarters being in the same room. Every settler needs basic supplies for many things throughout their day, and there's no better place to get them than a general store, which is what Spectacle Island needs next. Having shelves at the front of the store where people can come in, steal something and run out seems like a bad idea in the apocalypse. But with the police station being right around the corner and turrets guarding the entrance, the owner isn't too worried about thieves. Plus, even if you do get past the turrets, you won't get off the island unless you're a very good swimmer. The shop owner also has his house connected to the back of his store, with some extra storage ready to resupply the store. Continuing on the theme of stores, I now want to build a clothes store. This store offers settlers a place to not only purchase some new shoes or clothes, but it also acts as a seamstress, where clothes can be patched up or where they can even get their shoes repaired. Finding an intact pre-war piece of clothing would be like finding gold, and keeping it in good condition would be ideal over finding new outfits. The industry of Spectacle Island has come along well, but there still isn't really that many houses where settlers working in the industry can live. So now I'm going to continue to grow the population of Spectacle Island by building some more houses. I built this 2-story house, which has some fenced off garden areas where the owners grow some crops. Inside is large enough to house a large family, so I leaned into that with the interior. Downstairs they have their kitchen, and next to that a fireplace to keep the house nice and warm, and a dining room where the family can eat. Upstairs we have the bedrooms. I imagine this one is a teenager's room, and here maybe a couple of younger siblings share this bunk, and finally the master bedroom where the parents sleep with a cot for their newborn also. Moving back outside, I also built another shack below one of the watchtowers we built earlier. Both of these houses get power supplied to them by these 2 wind turbines. With another shack added on the shoreline, this whole residential area feels much more lived in. With families now living on the island, their children are going to need a school, where the Minutemen can teach them their history and invaluable survival skills. Here we have the school building, which are made out of logs, similar to some of the other important structures, with a single classroom where students get taught English, basic mathematics, and the history of the Commonwealth. However, this school doesn't just teach in classrooms. They also have a greenhouse where they teach students agricultural lessons, invaluable for surviving in the Commonwealth wasteland. With the boat logistics of Spectacle Island in place, the Brotherhood's anti-teleportation devices protecting against the Institute, and the industry ready to produce and supply the entire Commonwealth, all that Spectacle Island is missing is some settlers to come and move in. We now have farmers working in the fields, fishermen catching fish, Minutemen keeping an eye on the perimeter of the settlement, postmen delivering parcels, and sailors running the logistics. With that, we can now call Spectacle Island rebuilt. With Spectacle Island rebuilt, the Minutemen have been able to supply the Commonwealth War more efficiently, helping the Minutemen hold their territory. But they can't hold the line forever. The Institute have the upper hand. They're since not needing supplies like humans, able to strike at any time and stay in battles as long as they're alive. The Minutemen can't fight forever. Soldier morale and basic human needs cannot compete with Institute forces. The Brotherhood of Steel know this, which is why their scribes have been working tirelessly, repairing a super weapon which once allowed them to defeat an enemy on the other side of the wasteland, Liberty Prime. He is now fully operational. The Minutemen and Brotherhood have an opportunity to use this moment to deliver the final blow to the Institute. A frontal assault on the Institute would be too risky, which is why we've come up with a plan. The Brotherhood will use Liberty Prime as a distraction. They will march towards the CIT ruins, creating as much chaos as possible, grabbing the attention of the Institute. Meanwhile, a squad of Minutemen, staying in small numbers to avoid attention, will probe their way into the Institute, using the only access which we could find, an underground pipe network leading through an older section of the Institute. Once inside, the Minutemen will plant explosives. The Minutemen need to be quick, as the Institute will soon realise that Liberty Prime is just a distraction. We can't negotiate with the Institute. Our only hope at peace in the Commonwealth is through their destruction. This operation may be our one and only chance at stopping the Institute. This battle will shape the future of the Commonwealth forever.
All systems nominal. Weapons hot. Mission: the destruction of any and all Chinese communists. Probability of Chinese victory: impossible.
to see you again.
All the enemies you've created, you can't imagine why I'd be standing here?
Now you plan on what? Destroying everything?
I wanted to see you one last time, before your whole empire comes crashing down around you.
Well, none of it matters now, I suppose. You'll accomplish your task and ruin humanity's best hope for the future. You've doomed humanity. You know that.
Relay's ready whenever you are, boss. Shall we?
All right, Sturgis. Fire it up.
See you on the other side.
Whenever you want to see humanity's best hope for the future go up in smoke, just hit that button.
I can feel it wash over me. The heat, the force, the radiation. The fear. This wasn't the world I wanted, but it was the one I found myself in. I know the world has changed, but the road ahead will be hard. Because I know war. War never changes.
I'm running out of time. I need that serum. What am I gonna do? Am I stuck like this? No! 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 Could I end up like those dumb brutes? No.